It began on a seemingly ordinary Friday afternoon, March 11th, 2011, at exactly 2:46 p.m. Across Japan, people were going about their daily routines. Students in classrooms, office workers at their desks, shopkeepers tending to customers. No one could have predicted that, in just moments, their world would be turned upside down. The ground started to tremble, a sensation so familiar in Japan that most people barely paused. Earthquakes are woven into the fabric of Japanese life, and minor tremors are often met with calm acceptance. But this time, something felt different, an uneasy tension in the air, a subtle warning that this was no ordinary quake. Within seconds, the tremors intensified. This was not just another earthquake. It was a magnitude 9.0 megathrust event, one of the most powerful ever recorded on Earth. The energy released was almost unimaginable, sending shockwaves through the nation and far beyond. For 6 relentless minutes, the Earth shook with a violence that defied belief. Buildings groaned and swayed, windows shattered, and the very ground seemed to ripple. It was the most powerful earthquake in Japan's recorded history, and its effects were felt everywhere, from the bustling cities to the quiet countryside. The epicenter was located 70 kilometers east of the Oshika Peninsula, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Yet the quake's reach was vast, its power radiating outward and shaking the entire nation. No region was left untouched by its force. The seafloor itself shifted dramatically, thrusting the main island of Honshu a staggering 2.4 meters to the east. The force was so immense that it even tilted the Earth on its axis, a reminder of the planet's dynamic and ever-changing nature. The energy unleashed was thousands of times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. In many areas, the ground liquefied, swallowing cars, buildings, and roads. Entire neighborhoods were transformed into muddy wastelands in a matter of minutes. Roads split open, bridges buckled and collapsed, and skyscrapers swayed like trees in a storm. Infrastructure that had stood for decades was reduced to rubble, and the landscape itself was forever altered. Scientists would later discover that this earthquake was a multi-stage rupture, with several segments of the fault breaking in rapid succession. This complexity made the event even more devastating and posed enormous challenges for Japan's sophisticated early warning systems. For those experiencing it firsthand, the shaking seemed endless. Seconds stretched into minutes, and fear gripped the hearts of millions. People clung to each other, crouched under desks, and waited desperately for the nightmare to end. When the shaking finally stopped, the scale of the devastation became clear. Cracked earth, toppled buildings, and shattered lives bore witness to the immense forces that had been unleashed beneath the surface. In the days that followed, scientists worked tirelessly to understand what had happened. They revealed that the fault had ruptured in a series of stages, each one adding to the duration and intensity of the quake. This prolonged shaking was unlike anything Japan had ever experienced. The complexity of the rupture made it nearly impossible for even the most advanced warning systems to predict the full scale of the disaster. Alarms sounded, but the true magnitude of the event was only understood in its aftermath. And as the ground settled, a new terror emerged. The earthquake had triggered a massive tsunami, sending towering waves racing toward the coast. In mere moments, entire towns would be swept away, and the tragedy would deepen. In just a few minutes, the course of history was changed forever. The 2011 earthquake was a stark and terrifying reminder of nature's untamable power, a moment that would leave an indelible mark on Japan and the world. The earthquake was just the beginning. In a matter of seconds, the ground convulsed with unimaginable force, toppling buildings and sending shockwaves of panic through the streets. People clung to each other, bracing against the relentless shaking, unaware that an even greater threat was gathering strength beneath the waves. Deep beneath the ocean, the seafloor's violent thrust displaced an enormous volume of water, birthing a monstrous tsunami. This sudden movement unleashed energy equivalent to thousands of atomic bombs, setting the stage for a disaster that would soon engulf the coast. Japan's sophisticated warning system sprang into action, predicting waves of 3 to 6 meters. Sirens wailed and alerts flashed across screens, urging people to flee. But the reality that unfolded was far worse than anyone had anticipated. The unique shape of Japan's coastline, with its narrow bays and inlets, funneled and amplified the incoming waves. Instead of dispersing, the water was channeled with terrifying force, magnifying the tsunami's destructive power as it raced toward land. Seawalls, some towering over 10 meters high and built to withstand the worst storms, were overtopped or shattered in moments. The water surged over these barriers as if they were nothing, rendering years of engineering effort futile in the face of nature's wrath. In Miyako City, the waves reached an astonishing 40.5 meters, higher than a 12-story building. The sheer scale of the water's rise was almost unimaginable, dwarfing everything in its path and leaving devastation in its wake. The tsunami surged inland with relentless speed, erasing entire towns from the map. Streets, homes, and memories were swallowed by the advancing wall of water, leaving behind only silence and ruin. The water scoured the landscape, tearing buildings from their foundations and carrying them away like toys. Debris filled the streets, and the force of the current left nothing untouched. For many, the presence of seawalls created a false sense of security. Believing themselves protected, some residents hesitated to evacuate, precious minutes slipping away as the tsunami drew closer. The disaster exposed the flaws in relying solely on physical barriers. Seawalls, once symbols of safety, now stood broken and battered, stark reminders of the limits of human engineering. The tsunami's long wavelength allowed it to carry energy across vast distances, crossing the Pacific Ocean at jetliner speeds. Even far from the epicenter, its power remained undiminished, threatening coastlines thousands of kilometers away. As the tsunami approached shallow waters, its height grew dramatically. What began as a barely noticeable swell in the open ocean transformed into a towering wall of water, crashing onto the shore with unstoppable force. The event washed away not just homes and neighborhoods, but also lives and the illusion that humanity could ever truly tame the sea. Survivors wandered through debris fields, searching for loved ones and remnants of their former lives. The mechanics of the tsunami were cruelly efficient, destroying infrastructure in seconds, overwhelming everything in its path, and leaving behind a landscape forever altered. In the aftermath, it became painfully clear that engineering alone could not protect against nature's fury. The disaster forced a reckoning, reminding us of the ocean's immense power and the need for humility, preparation, and respect in the face of such overwhelming force. As the tsunami's devastating waves finally receded, leaving behind a trail of destruction along Japan's coastline, a new and even more insidious threat began to unfold, one that would have consequences for years to come. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, perched on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, suddenly found itself at the epicenter of a crisis. Designed to withstand earthquakes and tsunamis, the plant was about to face a disaster that would test every safety measure in place. When the massive earthquake struck, the reactors automatically shut down as intended. But the tsunami that followed was far larger than anyone had anticipated, surging over the plant's seawalls and flooding critical infrastructure. The floodwaters quickly inundated the emergency diesel generators, which were supposed to provide backup power in emergencies. With these generators submerged and destroyed, the plant was plunged into a total station blackout. Without electricity, the cooling systems that kept the reactor cores stable failed. Temperatures inside the reactors soared, and the situation grew increasingly desperate by the hour. As the heat built up, chemical reactions produced hydrogen gas, which accumulated inside the reactor buildings. Eventually, the gas ignited, causing massive explosions that tore through the facility and released radioactive material into the air. In the aftermath, investigations revealed that the disaster was not simply a result of natural forces, but was largely man-made. Experts concluded that with better planning, stronger safety protocols, and more rigorous oversight, the catastrophe could have been prevented. The plant's design flaws, such as placing backup generators in low-lying, flood-prone areas, and regulatory failures, were critical factors that contributed to the scale of the disaster. Brave workers risked their lives, donning protective suits and battling to cool the overheating reactors. Despite their heroic efforts, a triple meltdown occurred, releasing vast amounts of radioactive material. The radioactive fallout contaminated land, sea, and air, forcing the evacuation of over 150,000 residents. Entire communities were uprooted, and once fertile farmland and vibrant coastal towns became part of a vast exclusion zone. Today, the abandoned towns and empty streets near Fukushima stand as haunting reminders of the disaster. Radiation warning signs mark the boundaries of areas where life once thrived, but now remain off-limits. The failure at Fukushima was ultimately a failure of imagination, a stark lesson in the dangers of underestimating nature and overestimating our own preparedness. The disaster forced Japan and the world to rethink nuclear safety, highlighting the urgent need to anticipate even the unthinkable and to build resilience against future catastrophes. The disaster forced Japan into self-reflection. Warning systems underestimated wave heights, costing lives. By 2013, a new system provided faster, more accurate estimates. The event spurred a revolution in earthquake science. Researchers found the largest slip occurred in a shallow fault area. This changed understanding of tsunami generating potential. Globally, nuclear safety standards were reviewed. Stress tests for plants became standard, emphasizing redundant safety. Public communication shifted to urgent, clear warnings. The focus was on compelling action, not just data. Rebuilding Tohoku's coastline was monumental. The debate centered on how to rebuild, larger seawalls or adaptation. Giant walls rose, but critics warned of false security. Soft engineering focused on natural buffers and relocation. The emphasis shifted to keeping people out of harm's way. Rebuilding became a patchwork of strategies, reflecting community compromises. Some towns chose walls, others relocation. The debate was about Japan's relationship with the sea. It was a conversation about living with risk. Absolute safety was an illusion. The disaster's impact rippled globally. Tohoku was a manufacturing hub for critical components. The earthquake disrupted global supply chains. Automakers and tech companies faced shortages. The event highlighted supply chain vulnerabilities. Companies shifted from cost efficiency to resilience. Diversifying suppliers and stockpiling became priorities. The economic impact within Japan was immense. The disaster reshaped global business philosophy. It forced a re-evaluation of risk. The environmental impact was profound. The tsunami dragged debris into the Pacific Ocean. Debris traveled across the ocean, creating new problems. Items from Japan washed up on North American shores. Concerns about invasive species arose. Fukushima's nuclear accident had severe environmental effects. Radioactive contamination created an exclusion zone. Managing contaminated water became a challenge. The disaster's environmental legacy will persist for decades. It highlighted the complex challenges of nuclear accidents. The disaster left a deep mark on society. Nearly 20,000 people were dead or missing. The destruction led to mass displacement. Many evacuees never returned, accelerating depopulation. The young left, leaving older populations behind. Social cohesion and community viability were challenged. Psychological tolls were immense, with PTSD and anxiety prevalent. The concept of disaster-related deaths was recognized. The disaster revealed the strength of Japanese society. Kizuna, or bonds between people, became a rallying cry. The disaster was a powerful teacher. It emphasized respecting nature's power and preparing for the unexpected. Defense-in-depth strategies became essential. Japan's disaster management plans shifted focus. Evacuation drills and social capital were prioritized. Globally, the disaster prompted reassessment of risk. International cooperation on disaster risk reduction improved. The event's legacy continues to shape Japan and the world. It serves as a reminder of modern life's fragility. The importance of memory and passing down stories was underscored.